Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing well. I just wanted to come to you today from one of my favorite spots at the park/cemetery and just share some of my thoughts on this idea of a changing practice. A changing practice that tends to reflect our changes as human beings, as spiritual beings. And I feel like this is an important topic to talk about because people have a tendency to get stuck on a spiritual practice having to look a certain way, especially in this age of spiritual spiritual consumerism, or this age where people feel like spirituality can be bought. I feel like it's important to talk about, because what people see as spiritual practice tends to be things like meditation, chakra balancing, listening to binaural beats, doing Reiki on yourself, spending time in nature, I don't know, using crystals, just kind of giving you an idea of the things that tend to look spiritual to people. Oh, there's a blue jay. That's one of the reasons why I like coming here is all the beautiful birds. And the thing is that none of that is wrong. Like, all of that stuff can be a part of a healthy and beneficial spiritual practice. But the problem that can arise is when we become attached to these practices and feel as though we need them in order to express our spirituality, or need them as a means of connecting to our spirituality. Now, if we need them, we need them. It really depends on where we are in our journey. But when I say need, I mean it in a specific sense. I mean it in the sense where if you are feeling guided to move forward in your spiritual practice and do something different, and you still feel like, well, no, this has been working for me for 5 years, 3 years, 2 years, however long it might be for you, and you feel like you still need to continue doing it, that's where there can be a bit of an issue. Because the whole point of your spiritual practice, just generally, I guess everyone has their own goals with their spiritual practice, but generally speaking, for those who watch my content and those who work with me personally, or through YouTube or whatever, know that if you're doing any kind of spiritual practice, it's to help you to get more in touch with yourself. For some people, it might also be to bring peace or bring stillness or something like that. But there's more to a spiritual practice than only superficial peace. It's also so you have a sense of connectedness to yourself, to your personal needs, to your inner voice. So when your inner voice starts speaking to you, you'll actually respond, and you'll listen, and you'll heed the call of that inner voice and what it's telling you to do or not do. So this is very common. I mean, it happened to me before, where I was used to doing a spiritual practice for a few years, like a certain part of my spiritual practice rather, and I started to get feelings that came up within that would tell me, like, okay, you don't need to do this anymore. There was one part of my spiritual practice that I was doing for a while, and I got that feeling like, you don't need to do this anymore. And I still continued to do it. And then because of that, the voice actually got louder and was like, you don't need to do this. It's almost like reassuring me, like, if you stop doing this, I swear you'll be okay. So once the voice started to get louder, I was like, okay, then I'll just stop, and it was fine. And sometimes when you don't listen to the voice, what can happen is you can actually do more harm to yourself than good. It doesn't mean that it's going to actually physically harm you, but it could just cause things to become more off balance than anything else. Whereas if you listen to the voice, you can actually make room for new spiritual practices or just new approaches that would be more beneficial for where you are now or where you're going. Because the whole thing is that if you have a spiritual practice, you don't necessarily have to continue to do that spiritual practice for the rest of your life. You can grow out of certain spiritual practices. You can evolve out of them. Like my practices that I would do with the angels that I've done for years, I was doing them for a while, and there was one day I noticed where I'm like, things feel different, like they don't feel the same, like they're not having the same effect. And I just got the feeling that I pretty much grew out of that practice. I don't need to continue to do that anymore, and I can move on to other things. So when you have that feeling, celebrate. It's a good thing. It's a good thing when you feel like you are able to move on to something else. And just also kind of like opening things up a little bit more is, besides moving on to another practice permanently, it could just be that maybe one day in the week you need to shake things up a little bit. All these things that people consider to be spiritual, for some people, may not be the best thing. Okay, so something normal like going to the movies or watching a movie at home, hanging out with friends, just reading a fiction book, could just be going for a walk, listening to music, all these things that people are like, that doesn't sound spiritual. Well, it's not about things looking spiritual, because who really determines that anyway? It's not really about things looking a certain way. It's about what you need. It's about what you need for your personal, just for your personal balance, your personal equilibrium. And everyone is going to require something different besides all the general spiritual stuff. And it's also good to keep in mind that these spiritual practices can help you to connect with your spirituality, with your sense of inner divinity. But your inner divinity does not need a practice. That is what it is, and it's always going to be what it is. What really needs that is the part of you that feels separate from that inner divinity. That part of you that is your ego. That feels that there's separation between you and that. And when you get to a point where you see that that divinity is all existing, permeating through you all the time, the practice, that strict, rigid practice, isn't really needed. Unless you specifically feel guided to do something, those practices are not needed. And it gets to a point where whatever you do is an expression of that divinity. So basically, you live your life as a prayer all the time. Okay? So I just wanted to share that with you, so you keep that in mind, reflect on it, sit in it, marinate in it, whatever you feel is necessary for you. But all of this stuff is stuff that, I just wanted to share. Okay, so I send you all so much love, and I'll see you all soon. Take care. Bye-bye.